Tonight's story is about a man who tried to do the right thing. He saw someone alone in the cold and opened his door. But what begins as an act of kindness becomes something else, a quiet unravelling, a slow shift, until the life he knew no longer belongs to him. This is a grounded horror story. No monsters, no ghosts, just the kind of fear that sneaks in unnoticed and stays. So settle in, dim the lights, and listen closely. This is He Asked for Shelter. I always thought of myself as a good person, not in any smug or saintly way, just decent. I paid my taxes. I gave my seat to old women on the bus. I never stole from work, even though my boss made more in a month than I did in a year. And when I passed someone on the street holding a cardboard sign, I didn't just pretend to fumble with my phone. I saw them. I nodded. Sometimes I dropped a few coins. But that night I did more than that. I brought him home. It was October, and the rain was cruel. One of those heavy, needling drizzles that clings to your clothes and eats at your bones. I was walking home from the late shift, my third double this week. The train had been delayed, and I had to cut through the underpass near the old rail yard. That shortcut always made me feel uneasy. Even during the day, it smelled of mould and piss, like someone had bottled misery and left it to ferment there. But it saved 10 minutes, and in this weather, 10 minutes mattered. He was huddled near the edge of the underpass, tucked beside a cement pillar. One of those places that people don't look directly at, just enough in shadow to pretend it's empty. He had a dirty green coat pulled tight around his frame, and a hat that might have once been stylish, now soggy and shapeless. His face was mostly hidden, but I saw his eyes when I passed, bright, alert, watching. "Evening," he said, voice low and surprisingly articulate. I slowed, hesitated. Something in his tone felt wrong. Not threatening, not friendly. Just too calm. "Hey," I replied, eyes on the sidewalk. I kept walking. "You got the look of someone who's lost more than sleep." I stopped. "Don't engage," I told myself. "You're tired." He's playing for attention. But something in his words scratched at me. I turned back. He was watching me. A faint smile under his unkempt beard. His hands were clasped over a folded yellowing newspaper. Not a sign. Not a cup for change, just the paper and a knowing look. "What did you say?" He shifted on the concrete, joints cracking like brittle twigs. "You work late, you walk fast, you think too much, and you've got no one waiting for you." I bristled. "That's supposed to be some kind of trick?" He shrugged. "Just an observation." I should have walked away. Instead, I stood there, dripping and dumbfounded. There was something odd about him. He didn't slouch or beg. He didn't mumble. He looked at me like he knew me, like he'd been waiting for me. "Rough night?" I asked, unsure why I was even still talking. He nodded. "Cold, too. But they all are now. Got a name?" "Ethan." He tilted his head. "Ethan. Solid name. You're kind. I can see that. Kindness gets people hurt." I didn't answer. He stood slower than I expected for someone who looked so frail. He wasn't tall, but he filled the space around him with a kind of quiet gravity, a presence. I flinched when he took a step toward me, but he didn't touch me, just stood close enough that I could smell the rain in his coat and something else beneath it, something dry and rotten like spoiled bread. "I'm not asking for anything," he said, "but if you've got an old couch or a warm floor, it'd mean more than you know." There it was, the ask. I should have said no. I should have walked away. Instead, I thought about my empty apartment, my bare fridge, the one toothbrush in the holder. I thought about the echo when I closed my door at night and the way the heater clanked like it was dying. And then I thought about him, alone in that underpass, rain needling through concrete like a steady eternal leak. "Just for the night," I said. "You can crash on the couch." His face didn't change. No grateful smile, no visible relief. He just nodded. "I won't be any trouble." We didn't speak much on the walk. He limped slightly, but he kept pace. When we passed by the shuttered bakery on 9th, I glanced at him and caught him smiling at something I couldn't see. A private joke, maybe. At my place, he stood silently in the foyer, dripping onto the mat. He scanned the small living room, the second-hand furniture, the stack of unopened mail on the kitchen counter. "Nice place," he said, without a trace of irony. I offered him a towel. He declined. I pointed to the couch. "You can sleep there. There's a blanket in the hall closet." Still no thank you, just that faint smile. I poured a glass of water, hesitated, then added, "You hungry?" He shook his head. "Already ate." It struck me then. He didn't smell like garbage or feces or booze. He didn't twitch or fidget like most of the guys downtown. He wasn't high. He wasn't sick. He was just there. As I turned to head to bed, he called out, "Ethan?" I paused. "Don't worry. You won't even know I'm here." That night, I didn't sleep well. I kept hearing sounds, soft, deliberate movements in the living room. Not loud enough to be alarming. Just rustling. The occasional thump. Once I thought I heard whispering. At 2:13 a.m., I crept out of bed and peered into the living room. He was sitting upright on the couch, eyes closed, arms folded, like he hadn't moved since I left him. I backed away, heart thudding, and returned to bed. The next morning, I found the blanket folded neatly, the towel untouched. He stood by the window, staring out through the blinds at the grey sky beyond. "You're heading out?" I asked, trying not to sound hopeful. He turned. "I could if you'd like, but you've got the space. Just until I figure things out." My mouth opened, but I hesitated. He took a slow step toward me. "Think of it like this," he said, eyes locked on mine. "You've already let me in. What's one more night?" I nodded. He smiled again, but this time it reached his eyes, and I swear I saw something shift behind them, something vast and cold and patient. By the fourth day, I stopped calling him a guest in my head. Not because I was trying to be rude about it, but because that's not what he was anymore. Guests say thank you. Guests accept boundaries. Guests don't rearrange your furniture when you're at work. The first time I noticed something was off, it was subtle. I came home late again, typical for me, and the lamp in the corner was on. I never left it on. Not to save energy or anything noble like that. It just wasn't a habit. It gave the room a weird hue anyway, a sort of sickly orange that made everything look jaundiced. He was in the same place as the night I brought him in, sitting on the couch, hands on his knees, staring straight ahead at nothing in particular. "You been sitting there all day?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light. He didn't answer right away, just slowly turned his head toward me. "I kept it warm," he said. I laughed nervously, kicking off my shoes. "You mean the seat?" He didn't blink. "The space." I didn't know what to say to that, so I went to the kitchen. He didn't follow, but I felt his presence like a weight just behind my shoulder. I microwaved a leftover casserole, picked at it while scrolling through my phone. No appetite, no notifications. Eventually, I wandered back into the living room. He was still seated, but something had changed. I couldn't put my finger on it until I looked down. My coffee table. He'd moved it, just a few inches closer to the television. The coasters were rearranged in a neat stack, and the magazines were gone. I had a couple of old issues of The Atlantic and Men's Health under the table, but they were nowhere to be found. "You tidy up?" I asked. He looked up at me, one eyebrow raised, didn't like the clutter. I stood there for a moment. "They were my magazines." He shrugged. "Out of date. You hadn't read them in a while." That stung. Not because he was wrong, I hadn't read them, but because he said it like he lived here, like he had some authority over what stayed and what didn't. I nodded, walked into my room and shut the door quietly. That night, I locked the door for the first time. Not that I thought he'd do anything. That's what I told myself anyway. But when I lay down, I stared at the shadows for longer than usual, wondering if it was possible for someone to be too still, wondering how long he'd been watching that blank TV screen in the dark. In the morning, I found my toothbrush damp, not wet like it had just been used, but recently rinsed. I stared at it for a long time before I picked it up and set it aside on a tissue. Then I grabbed a new one from the drawer under the sink. I didn't say anything. That evening, he spoke first. "You've got a good mattress," he said when I came in from work. I paused in the entryway, my keys still in my hand. "What?" He didn't look at me, just kept watching the TV, which wasn't even on. "Must sleep real deep on a bed like that." I forced a smile. "You haven't been in my room." "No," he said slowly. "Of course not." The next day I left for work 10 minutes early and doubled back after 5. I hid just outside my building, behind the dumpster across from my window, and waited. My breath fogged in the cold, and my feet went numb, but I stayed until I saw movement. At 8:42 a.m., he stepped out onto my small balcony, stretched his arms, and lit a cigarette with matches I didn't own. He stood there like he'd lived here all his life, like he was taking in the air on a property he paid for. I watched him flick the ash off the side with a kind of grace that felt performative. Then, after exactly 3 drags, he put it out and went back inside, closing the sliding glass door carefully behind him. When I walked in 20 minutes later, he was back on the couch, hands folded. "Good morning," he said. My stomach churned. I began locking my bedroom door every night. I bought a bolt and installed it while he was out walking. He'd started taking long, deliberate strolls in the evening, coming back just before dark. I asked him once what he did during those walks. "People watch," he said. "Helps me think." About what? About how easily things change hands. By the end of week 2, I didn't recognize my apartment anymore. Little things were changing every day. My cereal was in a different cupboard. The hallway mirror had been wiped clean and moved an inch higher. The bathroom mat was gone completely. When I asked, he said, "Oh, that ratty thing? It didn't belong." But it did belong. It had belonged for 2 years. I bought it myself from a second-hand store because it was soft and the right shade of navy. That night, I found it folded in the trash can outside, soaked in rain. I reached out to a friend, someone I hadn't talked to in months. I wasn't even sure what I was going to say. "Hey, I let a stranger move in, and now he's slowly replacing me." I typed the text, deleted it, typed it again, then just stared at my phone until the screen dimmed. When I finally worked up the courage to confront him, it was late. He was watching static on the TV, no sound. "I think it's time," I said, standing just behind the arm of the couch. "You've been here longer than we agreed." He turned his head slowly. "Time? You said a night. Maybe 2. It's been almost 2 weeks. He blinked. "I think it's best if you found a shelter or a program. I can help you find one." A long pause. "You want me to leave?" I nodded. He stood, calmly, fluidly. No aggression. But his presence filled the room again like it had that first night. "You invited me," he said, his voice soft. "You offered help. You said it yourself. You're a good person." I never said, "You didn't have to." My chest tightened. He stepped closer. "You think the world owes you something for that? That your couch is some grand charity? That kindness is a leash?" I didn't answer. He smiled faintly, and in that smile was something terrifyingly certain. Like he knew how the rest of this story ended. "I'll be gone tomorrow," he said, "if that's what you want." Then he turned, walked to the couch and lay down with his back to me. I didn't sleep. When I finally drifted off sometime near dawn, it was to the sound of the heater ticking and a strange creak in the hallway, like someone pressing their weight into the floorboards just outside my room. In the morning, the apartment was quiet. The couch was empty. But his coat was hanging on the wall hook by the door. His shoes were lined neatly beside mine. A mug sat in the sink, my mug, with a tea bag steeping in cold water. I walked into the living room and stared at the spot where he'd been sleeping for the past 13 nights. The throw pillow was still indented, and my bedroom door unlocked. I didn't see him all day. No note, no noise, no sign that he'd gone or that he'd stayed. Just absence, uncertain and uncomfortable. His coat still hung by the door, damp from the night air. His shoes were still there too, placed with quiet precision next to mine, as if reminding me that nothing had really changed. I should have been relieved. I told myself that over and over as I stood in the doorway of my apartment after work, staring at the stillness. He said he'd be gone. That's what I wanted. That's what I asked for. And yet, I found myself stepping quietly through my own home like I was intruding, opening my closet cautiously, checking behind the shower curtain even though I hadn't closed it. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching from just out of frame, just beyond the reach of my voice. I opened every drawer in the kitchen. Nothing missing. I checked the living room again. Same sad couch, same crooked lamp, his mug now empty, still in the sink. But in the bedroom, something was off. The comforter on my bed had been turned down, neatly. I hadn't left it that way. I stood frozen at the threshold, the cold seeping up my spine like a draught from an open window. I hadn't left my door unlocked. I was sure of it. I remembered turning the bolt with purpose the night before, fingers trembling from the conversation we'd had. Now it hung loosely, useless. I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake in the dark, back pressed to the wall, eyes on the door. Every creak became a footstep, every gust of wind a whisper, and every hour that passed only confirmed what I'd been avoiding. He hadn't left. The next morning, his coat was gone. So were his shoes. But something else had vanished too. My shaving kit, a small toiletry bag I kept in the bathroom cabinet, zipped tight, full of ordinary things, razor, scissors, a comb. Nothing valuable, nothing worth stealing. But it was mine, and it had been there yesterday. I turned the cabinet inside out, checked the floor, under the sink, behind the toilet, gone. I searched the rest of the apartment. More things were missing now. Minor, easily overlooked things. A half-burnt candle I kept on the coffee table. A pen I always left beside my notepad. One of the mismatched mugs I'd had since college. Not big things, not things someone would pawn, but enough to notice. Enough to make me feel like my home was being slowly, methodically erased. I stood in the middle of the room, jaw tight, fists clenched. I wanted to scream. I wanted to kick the couch over and tear the place apart. But all I did was whisper aloud, "Where the hell are you?" The apartment answered with silence. 3 days passed. He never came back, at least not that I saw. But the disappearances continued. My apartment was slowly being whittled down, pared back to its bones. First it was the small things, the sentimental junk. Then my favourite hoodie went missing from the coat rack. A framed photo of me and my sister was gone from the shelf. I found the frame, shattered it in the trash, the photo torn in half. Each day I returned home, the light was slightly different. The smell was off, less familiar. Like I'd walked into a replica of my apartment, made by someone who had studied it carefully but didn't know me at all. I started keeping inventory. I wrote down every object I could remember. 4 plates, 6 mugs, 2 pans, 1 red blanket from the living room. Black wool scarf, bottle of cologne half full, remote control, framed sketch by Dad, 3 photo albums. By the end of the week, 2 of those things were gone. I went to the police. I knew how it would go before I walked in, but I had to try. I brought a list of the missing items and explained that someone had been in my apartment, that they weren't stealing in the normal way, that it felt deliberate. The officer behind the desk listened patiently, nodding in all the right places. Then he asked if I had a roommate or if someone had a spare key. I said no. He asked if I'd been drinking or taking anything. I said no. He asked if I'd ever been diagnosed with anything. I said no. And then came the pause, the silent diagnosis. He gave me a form just to make me feel heard and promised to file a report. But unless you actually see someone break in or have evidence of forced entry, he said, there's not much we can do. I walked home with the certainty that if I were to disappear tomorrow, no one would come looking. That night, I nailed my bedroom door shut. Not just the bolt. Actual nails. 6 of them. I didn't care how it looked. I just wanted to feel safe. When I lay down, I felt calmer for the first time in days. My heart didn't race. My limbs didn't twitch. I pulled the blanket up to my chin and told myself I was finally taking back control. Until 3:22 a.m. when I heard the couch creak. Not just shift, creak, the sound of weight. My breath hitched. I lay frozen, staring at the dark ceiling, the air so still it felt like I was underwater. Then came the sound of a drawer opening. One I knew was empty. One I had already checked. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I barely breathed. The sounds went on for what felt like hours. Faint movements, muffled footsteps, the occasional click of something I couldn't place. Then nothing, just silence. When I woke the next morning, I found new scratches around the nails on the doorframe, like someone had run a key or a blade along the edge of the wood. I went to work the next day, but I didn't last an hour. My manager pulled me aside. "You all right?" she asked. I blinked at her. "Why wouldn't I be? You just seem off. And you've missed a lot of details lately. You didn't log your last delivery, and you left the freezer open Tuesday night." I didn't remember Tuesday. "I think maybe you need a few days," she said gently. "Sort out whatever's going on." I nodded. I didn't even argue. I just left. When I got back to my building, he was in the hallway, standing outside my apartment, wearing my coat, the black wool one that had gone missing. He didn't flinch when he saw me, just smiled and said, "It's colder than it looks today." I stared at him, rage and disbelief clashing in my chest. You've been inside, I said. You've been taking things. You're not supposed to be here. He looked down at the coat, ran a hand along the sleeve. It suits me, doesn't it? Take it off. He shrugged. Why? You weren't wearing it. I stepped forward. I said. He raised his hand gently, not threatening, almost pitying. Ethan, he said softly, you brought me in. You asked me to stay. You wanted to feel good about yourself. You needed someone to witness your kindness. Isn't that what this is really about? I didn't answer. I couldn't. He stepped around me, walked down the hall like he belonged there, like I was the trespasser. As he disappeared down the stairwell, I stood in front of my own door, breathing hard. And when I stepped inside, everything felt wrong. The couch was gone. The couch was gone. It didn't make sense. It was a second-hand faux leather thing, bulky and worn, with a sun-faded patch on the left armrest and a sag in the middle cushion where I used to sit every evening. It wasn't easy to move. Hell, it had taken me and a delivery guy nearly an hour to wrestle it through the hallway when I first bought it. But now, the wall where it had rested was bare. The carpet beneath it was darker, revealing the clean ghost print of what had once been there. No sign of dragging, no scuff marks, no mess. Just gone. I backed away from the living room like I'd stumbled into a stranger's home. The apartment looked like mine, technically. Same walls, same windows, but everything in it had shifted, just enough to make me question my memory. The picture frame on the wall was replaced with something abstract I'd never seen. My bookshelf had been rearranged. His books, not mine. Old, cracked spines with no titles. There was a dark throw rug in the centre of the room that I'd never owned. I opened the kitchen cabinet and found a different set of dishes. White ceramic bowls with gold rims. I'd had cheap plastic ones from a discount store. These looked expensive, like wedding registry expensive. I stood there, heart-pounding. No, I muttered. No, this isn't right. I opened the fridge. It was stocked, not with my leftovers or expired condiments, but with things I never bought. Imported beer, pressed juice, glass jars of anchovy paste, something called elderflower cordial. I don't even know what that is. I stumbled to the bathroom. My toothbrush, the new one, was gone. In its place, a sleek black toothbrush sat in a ceramic holder that matched the hand towels and soap dish. The scent in the air was different too. Musky, like cedar and aftershave. He had replaced everything, piece by piece. I paced the apartment, checking drawers, closets, even under the bed. What few belongings of mine still remained were either out of sight or oddly placed. My shoes had been shoved under the kitchen sink. My laptop was missing. The laundry I'd folded 3 days ago was gone, replaced by a perfectly organized wardrobe in sizes that weren't mine. I pulled open my dresser, his clothes, crisp button-ups, tailored slacks. Everything hung neatly, smelling faintly of starch and something vaguely expensive. And yet there were no suitcases, no boxes, no signs of someone moving in. It was like he'd been here all along, and I was the one trespassing. I grabbed my phone to call someone, anyone, but it wasn't on the charger. I checked the counter. My coat pockets, every room, gone. I raced down to the front desk. Karen, the building manager, was sorting mail behind the counter. "Hi," I said, out of breath. "Hey, I think someone's been in my apartment." She looked up slowly, blinked. "You mean besides you?" My stomach turned. "There's a man. I let him stay for a night. He never left. I told him to go. But now he's changed things. My stuff's missing. It's like he's replacing me." Her expression didn't shift. "Do you remember me coming in here maybe 2 weeks ago? Asking about spare keys?" "I don't think so," she said slowly, glancing at her clipboard. "I'm in 4B. Ethan Rowe." More blinking. She opened a binder and flipped through pages without purpose. "We don't have a 4B. I stared at her. "What?" She turned the binder around. The apartments listed went from 4A to 4C. No 4B. "That's not possible. I live there." "You sure you've got the right building?" "Karen," I said louder now. "I've lived here for over 3 years. I pay rent. I've talked to you every month at the Dropbox." She tilted her head. "Sorry, sir. I'm not familiar with your face." I ran up the stairs 2 at a time, my legs shaking. When I reached my floor, the door to 4B was open. Inside, music playing softly. Something classical. A violin and piano. Smelled like coffee and lemon-scented polish. He was sitting at a dining table I didn't own, sipping from a glass cup. He wore a black sweater with a low collar and jeans that fit him like they were tailored. His hair was combed, his nails trimmed, like he had a job, a dinner reservation, a future. He looked up, smiled. "Welcome home." I didn't step inside, I just stood there, breathing heavy. "What is this?" He gestured to the chair across from him. "Have a seat." "No." He sipped his drink unconcerned. "Suit yourself, but you're dripping mud all over the hallway." I looked down, and my shoes were caked with grime from the front lawn. My shirt was sweat-stained. I hadn't shaved in days. I looked like him. The way he'd looked when I first found him beneath the underpass. I whispered, "What have you done to me?" He set his cup down gently. "Nothing you didn't offer. You let me in, gave me a place to rest, warmth, shelter. You opened the door, Ethan." "This is my apartment." He raised an eyebrow. "Are you sure?" I turned and ran back down the hall, like past the stairwell, into the manager's office. Karen was gone. The mailboxes were gone. The room was wrong. Or I was wrong. I tried going to the police again, but when I gave them my name, it didn't register. I showed them my ID. They said the address wasn't valid. I called my job. The number rang twice, then disconnected. I emailed my sister, but the inbox bounced back, recipient unknown. It was like someone had torn me out of my own life and folded the page back down. That night, I didn't return to the apartment. I sat outside on the bench across the street, in the cold, watching the windows. I saw the lights go on at 8 p.m. sharp. I saw the silhouette of someone cooking in my kitchen. His kitchen. I saw him pause at the window and glance down, straight at me. He raised a hand in a slow, casual wave, and I didn't wave back. I didn't go in the next night either. Or the one after that. After 4 days, my keys stopped working. After 6, my name disappeared from the buzzer. After 9, I started sleeping on the bench. The people passing by stopped seeing me. They looked past me, through me, like I was a smudge on the glass of their day. And then one night, I looked down at my hands and saw dirt beneath the fingernails. A familiar odor clung to my coat, one I'd smelled weeks ago beneath an overpass. The fabric scratched at my neck, and when I took it off, I saw the tag had been cut out. I stood, walked slowly through the city. No destination, just motion. When I passed a man near the 9th Street underpass, he looked me over with tired, wary eyes. "Hey," I said, "spare some change?" He gave me a faint smile. "You got the look of someone who's lost more than sleep," he said softly. I blinked, and I remembered saying those exact words to someone once, someone kind, someone foolish. Someone I used to be. He lives in my apartment now. He wears my clothes, sits on my couch, well, his couch now, and makes coffee in the mornings the way I used to. He even has my routine. I watch him from across the street every night through the warped pane of glass beside the laundromat's broken sign. He draws the curtains at the same time I used to, 8:10 p.m., like clockwork. I don't know if he sees me out here anymore. Maybe he chooses not to. Maybe he wants me to watch. I haven't tried going back inside again. After that last conversation, if you could call it that, I knew something had shifted beyond repair. It wasn't just that he'd taken my place. It was that no one else seemed to remember I'd ever existed there at all. That erasure does something to you. At first it's rage, then disbelief, then shame. A deep, crawling shame that maybe you were forgettable. Maybe you were never really there to begin with. But I know I was. I still have the scars on my hands from putting that bookshelf together. I still remember the humming of the refrigerator when the seal wore down. The way the floorboard creaked near the bathroom sink. I remember the smell of burnt toast on a Saturday morning. You can't erase that from me, even if the rest of the world thinks otherwise. I sleep behind a row of dumpsters now, between the hardware store and the discount mattress outlet. There's a narrow alley just wide enough to stay dry when it rains if you tuck in tight and keep your back low. At night, I curl under a tarp I found balled up behind a truck bay. It's musty and smells like cat piss, but it keeps the wind off. I thought about checking into a shelter, but something holds me back. Pride, maybe, or guilt. I'm not sure anymore. I don't feel like I belong there. I don't feel like I belong anywhere. I keep my days quiet. There's a bench outside the library with a heater underneath, and no one notices if you sit there long enough with an open book. That's where I go during the cold stretches. I read things I've already read just to keep my brain moving. Sometimes I walk. I cross the city in long, aimless zigzags. Once, I passed a man in a grey hoodie handing out sandwiches to people huddled against a chain-link fence. He offered me one. I took it. "Name?" he asked, pen hovering over his clipboard. I opened my mouth and hesitated. For a moment, I honestly couldn't remember. Weeks passed, maybe longer. It's hard to tell time out here. The days blur together. You start living minute to minute by warmth and cold, light and dark. One morning I caught my reflection in a window. What was left of it? I looked like him now, the way he used to be. Before I took him in, before he replaced me. A coat 2 sizes too big, hair that curled at the collar, hands cracked from the cold. I couldn't remember the last time I'd spoken to someone who knew my name, or even asked for it. One night I saw someone standing at his window, my window on the 4th floor. But it wasn't him. It was a woman. Middle-aged. Curly hair, she wore a robe and sipped from a wine glass, staring out into the dark. She didn't look down, didn't notice me. The lights were different too, warmer, softer. The couch was different. A new bookshelf lined the far wall. The curtains were patterned. I stood up, heart thudding, and crossed the street slowly. The intercom panel was the same. I pressed the buzzer for 4B, a familiar click. "Hello," she said. "Hi," I said. I used to live there." She was quiet for a moment. "Sorry, who is this?" "My name's Ethan. Ethan Rowe. I lived in 4B. I was wondering if..." My voice cracked. "I'm sorry," she said, gently but firmly. "I've lived here for over 6 years. Maybe you've got the wrong building." Then the line went dead. I checked the mailboxes again. No E. Rowe. No trace. I don't know when it happened exactly, but sometime in the week since he took over, he moved out. He left, and someone else took his place. He didn't stay in my life. He just hollowed it out and handed it off, like it was never mine to begin with. I saw him again 2 days later, not in the apartment, on the street. He was sitting at the edge of a park bench near the train station, dressed in a pressed shirt and a sharp overcoat, reading a book. He looked clean, composed, like a man in control, like someone who belonged. I stood across the plaza watching him. He didn't look up, didn't flinch, just turned the page. But after a long while, he closed the book gently, stood, and began to walk. I followed. He didn't go home, not to the apartment, not to my apartment. He didn't go to a job or meet a friend. He just wandered. Across the city, past blocks I hadn't seen in months, past shuttered storefronts and alleys filled with people like me. He passed them all without pause, without fear. Eventually, he stopped beside a fountain in the city square. There was someone on the bench nearby, a man, middle-aged, wrinkled suit, holding a cracked briefcase. He looked tired, alone. The man, my replacement, leaned over and spoke softly. I couldn't hear the words, but I didn't need to. I'd said them once too. "You've got the look of someone who's lost more than sleep." And I watched, helpless, as the man on the bench nodded. And just like that, the cycle began again. I think that's the worst part. Not that he took my life, not that no one remembers me, but that I helped him do it. He doesn't steal. He waits to be invited, and we always invite him, out of pity, out of loneliness, out of that desperate need to feel good about ourselves. We give him the key, and he never gives it back. The last time I saw him, he was already inside a new apartment, different building, different borough. I spotted him through a window, barely lit, watching someone unpack a suitcase. The new man didn't know what was happening yet. Not yet, but he would. They always do. Just a little too late. I stood outside that window until dawn, waiting, hoping maybe he'd look up, see me, acknowledge me, but he never did, and so I walked away. I don't have a name anymore, but if you ever pass me on the street and I look at you for a beat too long, it's not because I want something from you. It's because I'm trying to remember who I was, and maybe, just maybe, warn you. Because one day you'll meet a man in the rain. He'll look harmless, maybe even kind. You'll feel sorry for him. And if you invite him in, even just for a night, he'll stay, and you'll disappear. Thank you for listening. Sometimes we open our doors out of kindness. Sometimes we let people in because we want to believe the world will return the favour. But not everyone leaves when the kindness ends. Some people stay, and some become you. If this story stayed with you tonight, you're not alone. And if someone ever knocks at your door, cold and quiet, and asks for shelter, just be sure you're ready to lose everything you think is yours. Sleep well, if you can.